Welcome to Spotlight Sessions, where we shine a
What's
light
your
on
story?
what does accessibility mean to you?
What's your mission?
Hello, and welcome to another episode of accessiBe's Spotlight Sessions. I'm your host for today's episode. My name is Sapir Yarden, and I head up accessiBe's nonprofit program. I'm really excited for our guest, Nikhil Shah, the Digital Communications Officer at Epilepsy Society. So welcome, Nikhil.
Hi, Sapir. Thank you very much for having me today. I'm really excited to chat.
And so are we. So why don't we get started, and can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm 22 years old, and this is my first ever job after university, my first adult job, as it were. So I graduated almost 2 years ago. It'll be 2 years this summer. So time has flown by, and I studied philosophy and psychology, which is all about people. So it's all about, I always describe it as our individual differences and our collective similarities. So what makes people or individuals unique, but what makes society bond? And I loved it because psychology was studying that from a scientific lens, but philosophy was more about the kind of reasoning and logic behind why things are the way they are. But at the end of the day, it was all about people. And I love people. I find people so interesting. I love their stories. And I'm very, very lucky now to be working in a job where I get to be surrounded by fantastic people on all sides of what I do. So it's really, really cool. And yeah, I'm digital communications officer, which means I look after our social media and use social media and other types of digital communications to try and my best to support people with epilepsy in the UK.
Amazing. I'm so excited about this position, this opportunity that you have, because I know you're doing such a great job. But can you tell us a little bit more about the Epilepsy Society and the work that you're doing?
Definitely, definitely. It's a really busy charity. We do so much. The breadth and depth of the work we do is just phenomenal. So I think the way I'd explain it is there are 630,000 people in the UK who have epilepsy. And our charity's mission is to transform the lives of people with epilepsy in the UK using world leading research, advocacy, and care. So, a bit of a mouthful, but it sums it up really, really nicely. Research, advocacy, and care. So, for these 630,000 people with epilepsy, epilepsy doesn't just affect them. There's their friends and family, their partners, siblings, there's the doctors, the nurses, their whole medical team, which includes psychologists, MRI technicians. And then there's all the people that work at all the charities and disability networks. And epilepsy impacts all of them. And our charity, the Epilepsy Society, is a centre, it's a hub for all of these people who have a connection to epilepsy. And I think that's the really special thing about it. We have on site, we have everyone from people running campaigns, which are getting epilepsy further up the national political and media agenda. We have the world's leading epilepsy researchers. So these are people who have spent the last 10, 15 years of their life dedicated to understanding and furthering our understanding of epilepsy. We have several care homes where we look after people with a range of kind of a spectrum of disabilities. We have psychologists, we have MRI technicians, EEGs, we have live-in patients, we have art therapists, music therapists. But essentially, it all boils down to transforming the lives of people with epilepsy in the UK. There's so much going on.
I love to hear all of that. And it's multifaceted, which means that you get to dip your hands in a little bit of everything, but also the breadth and depth
Definitely,
of your work is really meaningful. And
definitely.
what I love most is hearing about how awareness and education is really key to the mission, to unlocking how there's an understanding.
100%.
So then my next question to you is, what are some things people should know about the digital experience for people with epilepsy?
It's a really interesting question because I think the first thing that would pop into people's minds is photosensitive epilepsy, flashing lights, and things like that. And to start off with, not many people who have epilepsy have photosensitive epilepsy, which is really surprising. And it was surprising to me when I first joined because, that's the stereotype. And it's a stereotype I now work hard to break to break and put an end to. But yeah, only roughly 3% of people with epilepsy have seizures that are triggered by flashing light. But then when we're thinking about digital accessibility and digital safety, that's obviously a really easy trigger for people who have that type of epilepsy. So things like turning off autoplay or using some of accessiBe's digital products are really, really easy and important and necessary ways of just increasing digital inclusivity. Another really, really cool thing, and something I'm so proud to have worked on, is our Zach's Law campaign. So a few years ago, the short story is, a few years ago, there was a boy called Zach who was fundraising for us, and some Twitter trolls started sending him flashing lights and gifts because they found out he was fundraising for Epilepsy Society, and they were trying to trigger a seizure online, which is absolutely horrible. The problem is it wasn't illegal to do that. What they were doing was, by law, okay. And over the last maybe 3, 4, 5 years, we've worked really, really hard with politicians and key stakeholders in social media to make that illegal. And a couple of weeks ago, the communications offences were passed, and it's now, I think, punishable by up to 5 years in jail in the UK if you send someone a flashing GIF or a flashing lights image online with the intent of triggering a seizure, which I think is really cool. So I think it's really important to do what you can to stay safe online, with those features we were talking about. But it's quite nice to know that there are, charities like ours fighting for better rights as well.
I'm so sorry to hear about that experience, but the success that came out of it is also very important, and I'm glad that we can give a platform to share that. Wow.
Definitely, thank you. Yeah, it's a roller coaster of a story, and I could go into a lot more detail, but I think one thing to note is just how horrible of a place the internet can be, especially for people with disabilities, and not just epilepsy. But it's really, really important, I think, to remember people that are victims of that type of online trolling is there's a limit to what you can do to protect yourself. Ultimately, there are some just horrible, nasty people out there, and I think that's a sad but unfortunate truth.
So if everyone can do one bit to make the world a little bit more inclusive, what do you think that
What
could
would it
be?
be? I think it's education and just awareness raising. One of the best ways to describe inclusivity, especially kind of surrounding people with disabilities, is the idea around wheelchair accessibility. It's not society. Sorry, it's not people that are disabled. People are disabled by society.
Mhm.
So if you just take a building, the fact that there's no wheelchair ramp is what has disabled someone who needs that to go into the building. They are not disabled to go into the building just from their own existence. It's the lack of infrastructure around them that has disabled them. And I think if we as a society start thinking about inclusivity or accessibility at the beginning of what we do, whether it's a social media project or whether you're building a building, if you think about inclusivity from the beginning, and the easiest way to do that is ask stakeholders, ask people that have epilepsy, ask people that do use wheelchairs or that are blind or whatever. It's really easy to look at a finished piece of work and say, oh, this is perfect, anyone can access this. But more often than not, there's always something you can do. But when it's an afterthought, it's really, really difficult to change anything significant. A really simple example of this for me was when I learnt that the average literacy age, so the average adult in the UK, their reading age is about 12 years old. So when we're writing when the researchers have finished a really complicated paper, we have to then condense that into an accessible social media post, a social media post that a lot of people can understand. And when you've got an audience that has epilepsy, and epilepsy has a high comorbidity with learning difficulties as well. So when you've got that audience, you have to write in an accessible way, but you can't do that as an afterthought. You have to consider that at the beginning. So I think education, but also just thinking about inclusivity from the beginning.
That was very well said, and I'm so happy that the Epilepsy Society has you as a team member, that you're thinking about these things
Oh,
as
thank you.
the digital comms officer.
I try
Um,
to. It's difficult though, because I think when you're a resource thin team, like a lot of charities are, there's always more that you could be doing in all areas of work, not just inclusivity. But that being said, that's why thinking about it at the beginning is that much more important. It stops you from wasting time and resources later on.
100% agreed. So here's a question. How did you find yourself at this particular charity?
So it's a good question. Like I said, after university, this was my first job, and I was in a bit of a weird place. Like a lot of people, I guess, did not know what I wanted to do, but I think I knew that I loved people and I loved storytelling. I think it is a genuine privilege when you're given the responsibility to share someone else's story. And that's a big part of my job, which is I'm so fortunate about that. I think people with epilepsy are all very, very unique in their experience of epilepsy. But like I say, there's individual differences and collective similarities. And my job is to share people's stories, like, individual experiences in a way where the collective can understand them and appreciate and connect
Connect.
to them. And I think it's a challenge. And on social media, there's a lot of things like algorithms and whatnot that can make it more difficult. But ultimately, it was that I think that just the desire for storytelling and being surrounded by genuine stories. I think if I'd worked somewhere like a media outlet, I'd get to do a lot of storytelling, and it would definitely be important work. But I think it would be to someone else's agenda or what someone else wanted me to write about. Whereas I think here, I really get to just tell genuine, honest stories. Of course, there is an agenda, but I think the agenda is something that personally I I don't have many problems with it. What problems are there to have really? So
It's caring for everyone. It's caring for the members of our society, and you're telling the story of a significant community.
exactly, and I think the one of the really cool things is that I had very little connection to epilepsy before I joined. It's not something I ever expected to know about in my life or even really care about as much as I do now. It was very, very surprising to me. But very quickly, I think working at Epilepsy Society, you feel part of a community. And so when I said earlier that we're kind of a hub for everything epilepsy, you really feel that. And I felt that as soon as I walked in for my interview. And I think that was a big reason why I took this job on was not only do I get to do something amazing in sharing stories, but I get to be a part of a very, very, very special movement for people with epilepsy. Yeah.
That's awesome. Was there a particular moment that was like a myth busting moment about the community, the epileptic community?
There's been a few. There's honestly been a few. I think personally, there was a story I wrote about a man who we support. He lives in one of the care homes on site, and he's lived there for as long as I've been alive, maybe longer than I've been alive, which is really, really like made the experience of getting to tell his story that much more special. And his story was about a letter he received from King Charles just around the time of his coronation, and it made the front page of Martin's hometown in Wales. And I think seeing how much that meant to him was something that was really special to me personally. But I think the most remarkable thing, and this is something that there's no one moment, it's just something I've come across consistently since the day I joined. It's the resilience of people with epilepsy. Nothing seems to keep them down. There's this desire to just keep going that does inspire me every day. If there's a day where where I'm not feeling up to it and work or anything in my life, it's very easy to look at people with epilepsy and be inspired by them. And I think that's something that also makes my job and getting to talk about this community that much easier and more exciting. It's There's a genuine resilience. I've never seen it anywhere else. It's remarkable, honestly remarkable. Yeah.
Your excitement about it is contagious. So I'm really glad that we had this opportunity. Do you have a final message, something that you would want to share to brands and businesses about what they could do for inclusion, or anything else that you'd like to share with us today?
Um, First thing that comes to mind is if you see someone having a seizure, of us, our seizure first aid advice is calm, cushion, cool. So stay calm, cushion someone's head, and call an ambulance. There's a lot more things that you could do, but this is three easy words, easy to remember. So calm, cushion, cool, and educate yourselves. We've got a fantastic like epilepsy lunch and learn style video, which we're so keen for more organizations to watch and to learn about what we do, how to support colleagues or staff members with epilepsy. And I think that's the most important thing. It's remembering that at the end of the day, we're people, and businesses obviously have to run like a business, but people are at the center of them. And if there's anything you can do to make those people more comfortable, you'll definitely have a better business at the end of the day for it. So, yeah, that's
Thank
what I
you
would
so
say.
much for joining today, Nikhil. It was so great to have you as a guest.
No, thank you really very much. It was really nice to be here.
Of course. And to all of our viewers, thank you for tuning in for another episode. You can like and subscribe to this channel. You can also follow us on Instagram at accessiB_community, and we'll continue the journey there. See you soon.